Starfinder 2nd Edition is here, and all of it is Pathfinder 2E compatible, which means I get so many new toys to try to break the game with. Let's start diving into some of these. I'm so excited for this. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben, you here for a Starfinder 2E video for the first time, and welcome to the best new Ancestry Feats. Got some exciting news here, probably some unexpected stuff. The folks at Paizo gave me very early access to this content so I could make some really good strategy content and have it available right as Starfinder 2E is actually releasing. So shout out to Rue and everyone else at Paizo for making this happen. Now, I love Pathfinder 2E, and all of this Starfinder 2E content is compatible within that system. So, as I read through this book, I am going to be releasing videos daily going over everything that I learned and sort of giving you a look at strategy content. So I'm going to be working really, really hard this week. I am probably going to put north of 40 hours into producing videos. We're doing at least 5 videos this week, Monday through Friday, maybe more next week if I'm not quite through all of the content that I want to talk about. So if you want to support content like this happening in the future, please subscribe to this channel. It is the best thing you can do to help me for free. And if you've got a little bit of money, throw $5 my way, become a YouTube member, get early access to my content, and encourage me to keep doing this. Now, I'm going to try to keep this brief while diving into strategy, which is a hard thing to do. So I'm going to very briefly show off your new options for ancestries and heritages. And then we're going to start diving into what I think are the best ancestry feats for each one of these options. And I'm going to try to give you some examples of when and how you might be using them. So this is going to be more than just I'm going to read the feat to you today. And I'm going to be coming at this from a Pathfinder 2E player perspective, so I am often going to reference classes that it might be really good in Pathfinder 2E to throw these new ancestry feats and heritages onto. All right, so at a glance, here is what you are looking like for your new character creation options. So we have 6 new options, and there are some other things that are included again in the book, like human and android. We have a really, really good mix of playable ancestries here, in my opinion. Many of them have multiple arms, and there is going to be a new arm switching mechanic where if you have multiple sets of arms, you essentially are going to select which set of arms is your active set of arms. And some of these ancestries are going to give you bonuses if you are not doing things with certain sets of arms. We have the charisma-based Lashunta that might make excellent party faces. We have the competitive Pahtra, which have some unique skill action-based abilities, allowing them rerolls or statistical boosts to skills. The telepathic Shirren, which have some cool language-based skills, as well as some very good skill-based abilities as well. The Skittermanders with 6 arms and some very, very strong ancestry abilities that I am very excited to start throwing on characters. The menacing and battle-ready Vesk, who have excellent sort of frontliner abilities built into their ancestry feats. The Ysoki, who are essentially the spiritual successors to the rat folk, who have very cool cheek pouches. And then we have 2 versatile heritages, the Borai and the Prismeni. So these are things that you can combine with the above, and instead of taking one of the heritages from your ancestry, you can take these instead, and both have some really cool abilities. One quick note here. I do not think there is anything new and interesting on the android. For those of you familiar with Pathfinder 2E, the android has 2 standout abilities, in my opinion. The Nanite Surge action, which is giving you a +2 status bonus to a skill check, and the Advanced Targeting System, which gives you 1 casting of the spell Sure Strike. I'm not going to cover the android because I think these are the 2 standout things, and they are already existing and not new, but since I'm giving every other ancestry a nod, I figured I should at least do that for Android. And one final note here before we get into the new stuff. Normally I kind of do a bunch of editing and bullet points and throw things on screen like this, but due to the just sheer amount of content that I'm going to be producing this week, we're just going to hang out in the PDF and talk about things this week. I hope you'll forgive me for that. Let's get into it. So first I'm going to start with the Barathu, which are really unique in that they have a fly speed of 20 feet just from the get-go at level 1. They are sort of these really like little blimp-like creatures. They're really kind of cool looking. And I think it is worth noting that they can retrain Ancestry Feats in 1 day of downtime rather than 1 week, which is pretty cool. So if you see some feats you like and you're like, oh man, I would want these some days, well, you can just take them on some days. And you also have a little bit of telepathy as a treat. Now, I specifically mention this because I think the strongest Barathu feat is Convergent Evolution at 9th level. So when you take this feat, you select up to 3 different ancestries. You can select ancestry feats from those ancestries in addition to the Barathu ancestry feats. And you gain 1 ancestry feat you qualify for of 5th level or lower from one of the selected ancestries. You can retrain the selected feat once per day during your daily preparations. So that doesn't even require the day of downtime. So, selecting a Barathu is not only going to give you a fly speed, but it is also going to give you incredible degrees of adaptability. If you see cool things in this video and you're like, man, I wish I could get multiple of those from different characters, ta-da! This is how you do it. So if you love like min-maxing and like getting the perfect combination of like a class and an archetype to just make a disgusting build, a Barathu might be an incredible way to do that, where you get to be an incredibly changeable and flexible character for whatever environment you're walking into. Oh, we know we're going to like be near a sun today. Cool. I am going to grab some ancestry feat that gives me resistance to extreme heat. You know, that is going to be the sort of stuff that you're capable of doing with this. And a trend that you are going to see in Starfinder 2nd edition design is when there's a good ancestry feat, it tends to have a follow-up at 17th level. And that is where we get manifold evolution. So you increase the number of ancestries you can select with Convergent Evolution to 6. 6. That's so many. And you gain 2 additional ancestry feats you qualify for of 13th level or lower. And you can retrain 1 or both of these during your daily preparations. This is really cool, and once you have a degree of system mastery of Starfinder 2E, where you know and understand what all of your various options are, this is going to be capable of creating some absolutely disgusting builds, and I am very much looking forward to breaking this later on. Next up is the Humble Human. Now, we are very familiar with humans. They tend to be quite good, and Natural Ambition as a first level feat, which allows you to take an additional first level class feat, is often sort of build defining for many characters. But we're going to ignore the ones like Natural Ambition that already exist in Pathfinder 2E, and we're going to talk about the new ones. And I think there's kind of 3 good ones here. The first is Confident Actualization, which is a 5th level feat. You're about to either attempt a saving throw or a skill check, and you get to roll that with advantage. You get to roll it twice and use the better result, and this is a fortune effect. Fortune effects are pretty rare in Pathfinder 2E, and they are slightly more common in Starfinder 2E. And if you have a class or a situation which really requires you to succeed on something, this can be maybe build defining. So Pathfinder example, the Inventor. The Inventor has a skill action called Overdrive, where you make a crafting check to determine essentially how much bonus damage you are going to get to add that combat. And it might be the difference between adding 4 or 5 additional damage to each one of your strikes or adding 0. So it is a huge degree of variance. And if you just, as an ancestry feat, get to roll that check with advantage, you become so much more consistent in combat. And you remember how I said when there's good feats, they make them better at 17th level? Well, over here, we have persistent confidence. So you can use confident actualization once per hour rather than once per day. So at 5th level, you get to do that in your big fight of the day, and at 17th level, that turns into every fight of the day. Which 17th level is maybe at the tail end of your campaign in most cases, but being able to have just a great degree of consistency in every fight that you are going to have feels great to me. The other one here that I think is quite good is Inner Wellspring. This requires that you have a focus pool, and as a single action activity once a day, you can just regain 1 focus point. So for on your focus point centric classes where you might want to use a, say, 2 action focus spell every turn of the fight, this just gives you that ability to just kind of keep going. This is very good. So again, Pathfinder example, your psychics that have very, very powerful amped cantrips, being able to gain access to effectively 1 more focus point is a really, really big deal. Humans notably also have a 17th level feat, Too Stubborn to Die, where you just simply refuse to die. If you have the dying or unconscious conditions, you lose the dying and unconscious conditions. If you're at 0 hit points, you have 1 hit point instead, and you increase the value of your wounded and doomed conditions by 1. And you can use this reaction while unconscious to keep you from dying. So if you are at 17th level and you're just like, I really don't want to die at the end of the campaign, this is a way to kind of keep the worst from happening. Humans feel powerful, kind of as always. They are going to be a good, solid choice, and I think they became more solid with the addition of some of these new feats. Next up are the Kasatha. These are one of the ancestries with multiple arms. You start with 4 arms, and you are going to have a switch hands action, which allows you to kind of switch between which arms you are using at any given time, which is going to create some very interesting play patterns that is perhaps beyond the scope of this video to really dive into. But if in Pathfinder 2E, you find yourself using a tentacle potion to temporarily get another arm, you might understand why having multiple sets of arms might end up being really, really useful. Natural Grace is probably their standout feat. So this is a 1st level feat. When you fail an acrobatics check or a reflex saving throw, you just get to reuse it. Anecdotally, I find that reflex saving throws tend to be the most common. And so to have the ability to re-roll a reflex saving throw from 1st level is really, really, really powerful. That's not to say there's nothing else to like from their ancestry feats, but I think that is probably the defining one. Uncanny Awareness at level 9 gives you a +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks for initiative rolls, and if you're tied, you go first. This is just kind of generically good. We have seen this on elves previously, and it was a very solid pick there. And the history buff feat, which is going to require that you take Historian, which gives you training in a lore, and kind of the unique ability. You can spend 10 minutes checking your notes or research materials to recall knowledge about a piece of history with any lore skill in which you aren't trained using your highest lore skill. So if you, say, took an additional lore feat to get a scaling lore, you could recall knowledge with, say, your legendary lore on any lore skill, which is pretty powerful. You don't do that instantly, so you're not going to get that benefit in combat since it takes 10 minutes, but that is a strong ability. And the history buff feat gives you a once a day hypercognition, which lets you recall knowledge, I think it's either 5 or 6 times as a single action, which is absolutely cracked. So if you are a, say, int-based lore character, like an int-based class that is going in on lores and recall knowledge actions, this can be very, very crazy. And finally, In keeping with the theme of scaling up good feats, there's a 17th level upgrade to Natural Grace, which again is the one that lets you reroll, where you get to do it once per hour instead of once per day. So this is probably a solid option from the get-go with multiple sets of arms, and as you go throughout the game, you're going to have very good really in and out of combat options. Natural Grace covers in combat stuff, whereas the Historian and the Hypercognition, you get, well, the Historian covers out of combat stuff really well, and the Hypercognition helps in combat. So I think this is a very, very good balanced ancestry. Next up are the Lashunta. This is going to be a very much charisma-based ancestry, and if you are looking to be a party face, this might be a very, very good choice for you. They've got some limited telepathy and a couple of good feats. The first is Center Thoughts. This is a will save version of what we just saw on the Kasatha. Kasatha? Yes, Kasatha. Okay. So Center Thoughts is instead when you fail a will saving throw against a mental effect, you get to re-roll it and use the better result. Now, the Natural Grace letting you re-roll Reflex is probably significantly better at the beginning of the game. You are more likely to encounter, your damaging AoE reflex spells, your breathe fires, your fireballs, that sort of thing when you get going. But as you scale up throughout the game, the will save effects tend to get increasingly scarier as you go up in levels. So even if you don't use this that much at the beginning of the game, as you level up, this is going to become better and better, as you don't want to take on a whole bunch of negative mental effects. There will then be a 17th level feat to upgrade this Centered Mind, where this becomes a once per hour activity, making it so that effectively every combat you're going to be able to do this. The Lashunta are going to have a handful of feats that give them access to spells. I really like the 13th level feat that gives you a casting of both Hypercognition and Mind Reading. I really think Hypercognition is a cracked spell, so to gain access to that potentially on classes that wouldn't normally be casting spells is a really, really big deal. And the Ancestry feats that you are capable of getting from this ancestry give you spell casting that kind of goes up and up and up. Oftentimes it's a cantrip and then a first level spell. This kind of works beyond that. Eventually, with Psychic Paragon, going all the way up to 6th rank occult spells as things that you are capable of getting from your ancestry. So if you want to be a face character and you maybe don't have spellcasting already, this is a good way to do it without necessarily eating up, say, your free archetype slots. I think my favorite feat from this ancestry is Focus Pheromones. So this is 1 action, 13th level, once per hour. If your next action is to attempt a deception check to create a diversion, a diplomacy check to request, or an intimidation check to demoralize, you roll that check twice and use the better result. I think this is incredibly powerful in out-of-combat situations. So if you're charisma-based, you are probably the face of the party already and have high diplomacy. So in a critical role-playing moment, if you get to roll that diplomacy check twice and use the better result, you are going to vastly increase the rate at which you succeed at, or even critically succeed, at these out-of-combat role-playing situations. I like this one a lot. And I'm going to say this a lot in this video, but I think this ancestry is fantastic. I think Paizo really nailed down and focused in on what people want from ancestry feats in terms of design in Starfinder 2E. All these ancestries are just absolute bangers. Next up are the Pahtra, and honestly, they're really cool. They do have a constitution flaw, which is not the best. But remember that you do have the option to just take 2 boosts instead of 3 and a flaw when you are creating your characters. And they do start with Dark Vision too. Nice little plus. Plus, look at them. They're so cute. Before we get into feats, I actually want to talk about heritages for 1 second, because one of these heritages is kind of cracked. The Miles Chosen Pahtra, which is the luck-based one. So, the first time each day that you critically fail a saving throw, you immediately re-roll the saving throw as a free action. This is a fortune effect. Do you remember what I said about fortune effects being slightly more common in Starfinder 2E? This is exactly what I am talking about. This is very, very, very powerful. And like perhaps a singular reason to play this. Critically failing a saving throw isn't going to happen every fight, but when it happens, it is absolutely devastating. It can often literally or metaphorically take your character out of the fight, either by reducing you to 0 hit points or by giving you such bad status effects that like it feels like your character has been de-leveled a couple of times. I think competitive spirit can be a build defining ancestry feat. So this is a once per hour reaction. We're going to put an asterisk by that duration, though. So this triggers when an ally attempts a skill check that you have trained or better proficiency in, and you are essentially competing with them. So you use your reaction, and until the end of your next turn, you can attempt the same skill check to perform the same action or activity that the triggering ally performed. You get a +2 circumstance bonus to this skill check. If you achieve at least 1 degree of success higher than the triggering ally, this use of competitive spirit doesn't count towards its frequency. Now, if you roll a critical failure on the skill check, you take a -1 circumstance penalty to all skill checks attempted with that skill for the next hour as you try out new techniques to improve your future attempts. I think that is largely flavor text, and I think that part doesn't matter. So I want to imagine an out-of-combat situation first. So someone is trying to pick a lock, they fail. You go, hey, move over, I'll try that instead. And you now get a +2 circumstance bonus. Well, guess what? They failed. Now, all you need to do to not use up your competitive spirit is succeed. And since you have that +2 circumstance bonus to this skill check, you are going to be very likely to succeed at that. And this is a very powerful, reusable reaction in out of combat situations. Like, imagine you are in some sort of diplomacy type situation. You're trying to convince someone to do it. Someone kind of botches their role, and you go, I'm going to step in with a big bonus to this. I think this can really allow characters who are very good at out of combat skills to shine even harder than they normally would. And I think this is something that is going to save a lot of social situations that are going to start going south. So I think being a Miles chosen Pahtra with this is already at level 1 going to result in you having a very good character, and we haven't even gotten to any of their other feats yet. Miles Melody is the other one, which conveniently requires you to be a Miles chosen Pahtra, which I think you already want to be. You just get a +2 status bonus to perception checks. All the time. There are no restrictions on that. Not on performance checks to dance. Just all of them. In addition, you can use performance to create a diversion, demoralize, or make an impression. And if you listen to music while resting, you regain a number of additional hit points equal to your level. This is a lot. This is very, very, very good. If you are a performance-based character, think your bards, maybe your swashbucklers of the world, this is just like getting another degree of proficiency in what is already probably going to be your best skill. This is build-defining levels of good. And I expect that we are going to see a lot of Pahtra moving forward. Next up are the Shirren. These are sort of your insect folk. They're kind of cool looking. They have limited telepathy and a pretty respectable set of stats here. 25 foot speed movement, 10 HP, and 3 attribute boosts, 2 of which are going towards saving throws, the other of which can go to your primary stat. If you don't care about charisma for social situations, this is a very, very good sort of basis on which to build a character. And there's a lot of good feats here. I want to start with one of the heritages here, the Defiant Shirren. So there's 2 things you get here. Number 1 might be very campaign dependent. If you roll a success on a will saving throw against an effect that was created by a creature with the Kukarn trait, or a creature you know is allied with the swarm, you get a critical success instead. Things that promote saving throws to the next degree are generically good. This one is pretty narrow. But I like the next thing a lot. Rebellious Defiance. So once per day, you decry one foe within 100 feet that you can see as a tyrant or villain and prepare yourself to defy them. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus on your attack rolls against this foe, and you gain +1 circumstance bonus to saving throws against their attack spells and effects. That is a very, very powerful, generically good action. If you have a boss enemy that you know is going to be difficult to hit, well, now you are slightly better at fighting them for a single action. This is, more narrow than something like the second rank spell Kael'gashirk's Axes that just can give you a generic +1 to your attack rolls. But this is pretty solid for an ancestry ability, or more specifically, a heritage ability. But the heritages here are just kind of good. There's also the iridescent Shirren, which has a one-action activity shimmering dazzle, where you pick a creature within 30 feet, and that creature must succeed at a fortitude save against your class DC or become dazzled for 1 round. Interestingly, this also lets you feint at a range of 10 feet rather than solely within melee reach of your intended target. So there's some good things to build around here in addition to just like the solid HP and stat spread of this ancestry. Communalism is a great level 1 feat. When an ally within 10 feet of you fails a skill check requiring 3 actions or fewer, you get to have that ally reroll the triggering skill check and take the better result. This is very good, again, in those critical moments where one specific roll is very important to your success in some task. This is a good backup thing. I also really like the first level feat Linguistic Prodigy. So you gain 2 additional languages of your choice, and every time you take the multilingual feat, which teaches you more languages, you gain another new language in addition to the 2 that you would normally get from that feat. And specifically, I want you to think about the Starfinder 2E world, where you might be traveling from planet to planet, or you might be at some tavern or outpost that is a giant melting pot of all sorts of worlds. The out-of-combat power of knowing a large number of languages is not to be underestimated. So even though like communalism is a very, very strong first level feat, like that is a very powerful reaction, it is competing like for real with Linguistic Prodigy. One of the characters that I played recently in Pathfinder 2E, I think took the multilingual feat either 2 or 3 times. And when the DM was like, does anyone speak Aklo? I was like, well, actually, I did dabble in Aklo. And I got some extra information from an enemy that, perhaps thought I wasn't going to be able to understand it when it was talking to its friends. My favorite effect, though, is Eager Assistant, 5th level feat. You love helping your friends and allies achieve their goals. At the start of your turn, you gain 1 additional reaction, which you can only use to aid. You see what's not here? That's right. There is no limitation here. There is not once per combat, not once per hour. At level 5, every turn you get another reaction. That is cracked. If you want to build a character that can aid, I think this is wildly better than everything that already exists. Halflings and I think humans both have some feats that give you bonuses to the aid check, but since the aid action has a flat DC of 15 in most cases, it's very easy to succeed and later to almost always critically succeed at your checks to aid. And so I think the extra reaction so that you can potentially aid someone and still take your reactive strike, or aid someone and still cast your reaction spell like Interposing Earth or whatever, I think this is incredibly powerful. Like swashbucklers with, is it one for all or all for one? I apparently mixed them up in one of my previous videos. Their aid action that gives panache, like I'm looking at Eager Assistant, and boy, that sounds good to me. Next up is Skittermander. I think this is my favorite ancestry from Starfinder. I also think it might be the most powerful. Is it a coincidence that those 2 things are going hand in hand? No comment. No comment. I know what I like. So they have a wisdom flaw, charisma, dexterity, And free boosts here, they're kind of adorable, and they have 6 arms. So again, they are going to have that switch hands action available to them, and they are generically going to have a +2 circumstance bonus to checks to aid an ally at skills that don't have the attack trait. So out of combat, when you are aiding people, like, you're going to be real good at that, even without any other investment. But guess what? They're going to have aid-related ancestry feats. Surprise, surprise. We're going to start with the first level ancestry feat, Hug Master. This just gives you Titan Wrestler for free, and a +1 circumstance bonus to athletics checks to grapple and to your fortitude DC to avoid being grappled. So if you like building grapple-based characters, this eliminates the need for you to take a background that is giving Titan Wrestler, or otherwise get Titan Wrestler from a skill feat at some point, and it is just numerically making you better at the thing that you want to do. 6 arms, you are the Hug Master, unquestionably. This is competing with Hyper, though, which just increases your speed by 5 feet. As we have seen with Nimble Elves in Pathfinder 2E, this is generically very, very good. It either makes you faster than everybody else, or it makes up for the fact that you might be in something like heavy armor. We mentioned the aid action already and the fact that you get a +2 bonus to that, but at 5th level, you get the Helping Hand free action, which is once per 10 minutes, effectively meaning once per combat. So you just ready yourself to help an ally as a free action, and this is your preparation for the aid reaction. So normally the aid action eats up 1 action on your turn plus your reaction, and this just kind of numerically makes your aid check better, as you are no longer kind of taxing 1 action on your own turn. This is very, very solid. At 9th level, the Skittermanders really begin to pop off. If you are doing something cool with your multiple sets of hands, you gain a free action with all hands on deck to switch between your sets of hands. Or, I guess more accurately, until the beginning of your next turn, you count 2 additional pairs of hands as your active hands. And then at the beginning of your next turn, you choose which set of active hands remain your active hands. So you can have access to all of your hands, and then you kind of get to switch when that is done. Generically powerful. Also, how would you feel about Recall Knowledge, but better? Hush gives you a Recall Knowledge with a +2 circumstance bonus to the skill check. If you get a critical failure, you fail, and if you get a success, you get a critical success instead. This is once per day, but a lot of times you will have one very important combat of the day, and it is kind of obvious when that happens. So to get a Recall Knowledge check versus a boss with a +2 bonus, and then if you get that success, you get the crit success instead, that can really make it so that you make a boss combat easier by getting multiple pieces of information. Like you could get a, say a low save, as well as something special about the boss's aura or something like that at the same time. Very, very good. Then there's Zoomies, which requires Hyper. You get the Quicken condition for 4 rounds. You can use the extra action each turn only to stride. Eat your heart out, haste. So this is 1 action rather than the 2 actions of haste, and it lasts for 4 rounds. Counting the first round of combat, most of your combats are probably not going past 5 rounds, right? So as a martial character in particular, you don't gain that much of a benefit from extra actions to strike specifically due to the multi-attack penalty. So the extra action to stride each round is really what you are looking for out of haste. A classic example of this is a Magus, who gets just so much stronger when they have haste cast on them, because you get to stride, spell strike for 2 actions, and then do something to recharge your spell strike. And that becomes a repeatable cycle that you can do every turn when you are hasted. Or as a spellcaster, you might be able to stride, get in range, cast a 2-action spell, and then a 1-action focus spell or a 1-action activity such as Demoralize. This is very, very strong, and I think a defining reason to play Skittermanders. Hey, remember how I told you when there's a good feat, they upgraded at 17th level? Boundless Energy. Your Zoomies is now once per hour, often meaning once per combat. So every encounter, you are quickened for 4 rounds. Um, yeah, this is good. This is really good. And I am very excited of the possibilities that exist for Skittermanders because of this. And if this already didn't sell you, how about all 6? Now, there is a requirement here. You aren't holding any items except in your active hands. And this is what I am going to call Surest Strike. The next time you roll an attack roll or a skill roll it 3 times and use the highest result. That is wild, and I don't think I know of anything else in the rest of the Pathfinder or Starfinder system that lets you do this. This is absolutely wild. And if you need to crit on something or you really need something to succeed, this is the way to do it. I love Skittermander so much. Next up are the Vesk. These are kind of your lizard folk. They are strong. They are also slow at a base movement speed of 20 feet. They get con boost, strength boost, and then 1 free at the cost of a wisdom flaw. As far as heritages go, the Brisk Wander Vesk stands out for increasing your movement speed by 5 feet, especially if you are going to end up being a heavy armor character. This can kind of be a deal breaker. You are also just slow at 20 foot move speed to start with, so getting that back to 25 and getting on pace with the average character is, I think, very, very important. Menacing Snarl is really a standout feat for me. This is a free action once per hour. When you frighten a creature, you increase the value of the frightened condition by 1. So this can mean that your demoralizing actions, either literally demoralize or something like a strike plus effect that strikes and then frightens a creature if you hit or critically hit. Like increasing the frightened condition that you do that way is pretty good. As a spellcaster, I am thinking about casting some of the higher level spells that inflict the frightened condition and can get like frightened 3 or frightened 4 onto creatures, and then increasing that number further with Menacing Snarl is kind of cool. There is not a range listed on this, so this is not within 5 feet, even within 30 feet. This is just you frighten a creature, which is what kind of makes me think about doing this on a spellcaster, despite the fact that this ancestry is, I think, on the surface very much melee focused. Kind of on that note, there is either a 5th or 13th level feat. Demoratosh's Claw. It is written as 5th level, but it is written under 13th level. I am waiting on an email back to figure out which it is. So that might not make it into the final video here. So, you're engaged in combat. 1 action, you regain a focus point. This is generically a very strong action, and it can be potentially paired with Menacing Snarl so that you can, use your cool focus point spell, which maybe frightens something, and then you make it even better. Just passing thought, the Resentment Witch is really good at prolonging status effects. I wonder if you can make a Vesk Resentment Witch that really goes hard. All right, that one goes in the pocket for later. There are 2 standout 9th level feats. The first is Ear Combatant. The trigger is you roll Athletics or Intimidation for initiative. You stride in a straight line directly towards an enemy. So that is just a free action move on your first turn. In terms of like tactics and strategy, this may or may not be a good thing. So even if you take this, you might not do it every single time, because sometimes if you stride directly into the group of enemies, you might get ganged up on very early on and go down before your allies end up supporting you. But on a larger battle map where it might be, even multiple turns worth of movement, because Starfinder combat is often going to be at a ranged focus in comparison to Pathfinder 2E, this can be very powerful. Now, as a note here, the trigger is that you roll Athletics or Intimidation for initiative. This does not let you roll Athletics or Intimidation for initiative. And I mention that because the next feat, Opening Roar, lets you roll an Intimidation check for initiative, and you can also use the result to demoralize one observed foe. So I have not gotten through the entire book yet, and there may be a new skill feat that just lets you roll athletics or intimidation for initiative innately. If there is not, and there's not good ways to just kind of do this, GMs might be a little lenient on allowing you to roll your athletics or intimidation for initiative. Back to opening roar for a second. I think this is really cool. Demoralizing as a free action is pretty strong. And I imagine that you can combine this with Battle Cry, which already lets you demoralize a foe when you roll initiative, so that you could end up with multiple different foes demoralized at the beginning of combat. That's super, super cool. And if you succeed on one of these, you can then use your menacing snarl to increase the value of that. There is very, very good synergy baked into this. I like the design here. It feels good. Next up are the Ysoki, formerly known as the Rat Folk. They have a really good attribute spread here. So they get Dex, Int, and a Free, and have a flaw in Strength. And Strength is not used in skill checks other than Athletics. And unless you are going wild on your gear, you probably don't really need Strength. So for a lot of classes, this is going to be a good stat spread, especially if you don't care about, say, adding your strength to your melee strike damage. I really like the Akatonian heritage here. So you gain trained proficiency in crafting and can use crafting instead of thievery to disable a device. But if you are already trained in crafting, you instead gain the quick repair general feat. So every party probably wants someone who can disable things like traps, and being able to use crafting and not having to be trained and keep training that proficiency in thievery up as you go on is really quite powerful. So your inventor type classes, you can now use your auto-scaling crafting to kind of be auto-scaling thievery and pick up quick repair at level 1 so that you're very good at, say, repairing your innovation that gets damaged all the time because you keep making it explode. Probably the defining feature of the Ysoki is the cheek pouches, which lets you store stuff inside of your cheeks. And multiple feats are going to follow up on that, such as the Quick Stow feat, which lets you store things in your cheek pouches as a free action. This goes all the way up to level 13th with Explosive Surprise, which I think is pretty good. So you can take 10 minutes to safely prepare a grenade and store it in your mouth. And then as a single action, you can draw and throw this prepared grenade, and you don't need a free hand to do so. So this is really neat. Like, you, in theory, can have both of your hands occupied with, a two-handed gun or something like that. And then as a single action, do two actions, draw and throw a grenade. And you also don't need free hands to do that. So this is action compression and it ignores hands. I have my eye on this as something that might be pretty good. I think I need a little more system mastery to know exactly what to do with this, but I've got my eye on this one. We're going to talk about one feat so I can talk about another real quick. So there is a level 9 feat called Underfoot. As long as you're small, which you are, you can end a successful tumble through action in a medium or larger enemy's space. And while you occupy an enemy's space, that enemy is off guard to you. Now that's pretty cool. The cool thing here is at level 13, the follow-up, which is Skulking Strike. So if an enemy that is occupying the same space as you uses a manipulate or move action, or makes a ranged attack, or leaves a square during a move action, you get to launch a surprise attack. You make a melee strike against the triggering creature, and if you critically hit, you disrupt that action if it is a manipulate action. So this is a reactive strike, kind of, that your enemy is always off guard to. So you have a slightly better chance at getting a critical hit. And if you care about tumbling through, say, because you are a swashbuckler who can get panache for doing that, you can not only get your panache by doing the tumble through, but you also make the enemy off guard to you, and you set up a reactive strike as well. This is really, really cool. Capping it off, I like Grandmother's Favorite as a level 17th feat. This gives you a casting of Divine Decree, which is a 7th rank divine spell. And this is the part I like. Once per month, whenever you would die, your body instead transforms into a swarm of rats. After 1d6 days, these rats gather in a safe space of the GM's choosing and reform your body. You return to life at your maximum hit point total. So again, if you are at the end of a campaign and you just, really don't want to make a new character because making a level 17th character from scratch is a daunting experience to say the least, this is a way to kind of cheat death and come back a few days later. I keep saying it, but this is a great ancestry once again. Okay, we are now going to go into the two versatile heritages, the Borai and the Prismeni. In case you are not familiar with a versatile heritage, what that means is you pick an ancestry as normal, but instead of taking a heritage from that ancestry, you can instead take Borai or Prismeni. The biggest thing here in considering whether you want to play a Borai or a Prismeni is whether or not you like the ancestry feats that you are already being offered from your ancestry. I've spent so much of today talking about how good many of these ancestry feats are. Let's go full screen for a second. When I sat down to make this video and start reading this PDF, I expected to, have like a top 10 list of like the top 10 ancestry feats from Starfinder 2E. And I was wrong. There are so many absolute banger feats. Like the design team did such a good job here. So both of these versatile heritages are quite good in my estimation. So you are going to have real choices for whether or not you want to play these. And I'm going to try to move a little quickly here because honestly, each one of these has like 6 standout feats. They're really good. Starting with the Borai, we have the Etheric level 1 feat, which gives you the Soul Shield reaction. This triggers when you would take void damage. You gain void healing until the beginning of your next turn, meaning you're damaged by vitality damage and healed by void effects that heal undead. So if your enemy goes and casts a 2-action harm on you, which would deal void damage and normally would heal undead, you get to go, okay, as a reaction, that heals me instead. This is a little bit narrow as a reaction, but in the proper campaign, this is incredibly strong. So if your GM is like, yeah, there's going to be all sorts of necromancers commanding undead, and they're going to cast 3-action harms, like you just get to go, gotcha, GM. Necrotized is another really good first level feat. You gain the Die Hard feat, which is kind of whatever. Here's the important part. Death effects no longer kill you if they reduce you to 0 hit points. This keeps you from automatically being killed or having your dying value automatically decrease, but it doesn't make you immune to other parts of the spell or effect. For example, you can still take mental damage and become frightened by a Vision of Death spell. You don't just instantly die from it. If you are not familiar with high-level Pathfinder play, or Starfinder play in this case, death effects start to become really common north of, about 13th level, to the point where, like, my party specifically has multiple reactions and spells prepared to get around the death effect and bring our comrades back from the dead. This is not going to do a lot at the beginning of the game, but if you are starting at a high level, this is very strong in the right circumstances. And the first level feats just keep coming here. Baleful Gaze is also very good. So this is a single action to make one living creature within 30 feet make a will save. And it is done against the higher of your class DC or your spell DC, and they become Frightened 1 and Stupefied 1 if they fail, or Frightened 2 on a critical failure, and the Stupefied lasts as long as it is frightened. So this is a single action to make something both frightened and stupefied at the same time. Now, once you use Baleful Gaze against a creature, it is immune for 24 hours. And this has a frequency of once per minute. This is solid. Again, Passing Thought. Resentment Witch that increases the duration of the frightened, and by extension increases the duration of the stupefied. Ooh. Oh, that sounds nice for me. Rip the DM. Hey, remember that whole 17th level upgrade thing? Baleful Presence is kind of insane. You can instead make your Baleful Gaze a 2-action activity, and then it affects every living creature in a 30-foot emanation, which is kind of wild. Note that is each living creature, so it appears that that would be your allies too, which I don't love, but hopefully you can position yourself well if you are going to blow that ability. There's a couple good 9th level feats here too. Shroud of Shattered Spirits gives you a reaction that can make you concealed, and it does apply to that specific strike. And Unleash Pneuma gives you a 5d6 damage of your selected type to all adjacent creatures with a reflex save using either your class DC or your spell DC. And this will either do vitality or void damage. Pneuma, I believe, is Greek. It means breath, so it is a baby breath weapon with your undead soul bursting out of you. So if you are a martial class and like you normally use an action to strike, this gives you a very good save-based action that you can use to round out your turn. And in campaign-specific situations, this could be very good at triggering weaknesses. Like if you know you are in an undead-heavy campaign, you get to choose Vitality and trigger the Vitality weakness of a bunch of undead. Potentially very cool. 5d6 damage is okay. You're not going to be competing with like rank-appropriate spell slots or anything, but it's very good if you don't have other things to do as 2-action activities. My notes for Stubborn Corpse just say wow. All right. So whenever you critically fail a saving throw against a mental effect, which is most will saves, you get a failure instead. Additionally, and separately, you get the deny failure reaction. This is a fortune effect. When you fail or critically fail a saving throw, does not have to be will, as above. You refuse to accept your failure, you re-roll the triggering saving throw. If your result is a critical failure, this use of deny failure doesn't count towards its frequency. So this is a feat that is giving you a essentially will save promotion while also giving you a once a day reroll fortune effect on any saving throw. This is very, very powerful. And if that wasn't enough, there's also a really good 17th level feat here, Undying. So if you have the dying condition and are about to attempt a recovery check, you're just restored to 1 hit point, lose the dying and unconscious conditions, and this is the kicker, you can act normally this turn. You increase your wounded condition as normal, but this is very, very strong for sort of a capstone ancestry feat. Once again, it's good stuff. And now we have the Prismeni. They also have a bunch of really good feats, starting with Drift Touched at level 1. This allows you to make a barrier within 30 feet of you. It is 10 foot long, 10 foot high. It grants concealment to creatures targeted through it. So this is more specific to Starfinder, where you are going to have more ranged gun-based combat. Like, imagine you are in some sort of hallway choke point and you just throw up this barrier. Well, now you have sort of vastly decreased your enemy's ability to target you from a range. This is a very, very nice tactical thing that you can throw up as a single action to round out a turn. And the barrier lasts for 5 rounds. This is not like a single round activity. So, you like Electric Arc, right? Because it's just one of the best cantrips in the game, if not the best cantrip. Well, how about if your Electric Arc can also power up batteries? So if you target battery or a tech-powered item, a tech item powered by a battery, that item isn't damaged. Instead, it regains 2 charges per spell rank. And if that is a tech item, but it doesn't have a battery, you can treat it as if it has a battery with 2 charges per spell rank for 1 minute. I have not gone into all of the Starfinder items yet that are going to use batteries, but this sounds very strong within kind of the sci-fi system that Starfinder is bringing to the table. You didn't need to sell me on Electric Arc, but like, while we're here, I'm in. The Prismeni are associated with this thing called the Drift. We're not going to go into it in this video, but they have a teleportation ability at 5th level, where for a single action, you can teleport a distance up to your speed. And if you are in the drift, you can then teleport double your speed. Pretty strong. The ability to ignore things like difficult terrain and such is absolutely solid. And having the potential, maybe campaign or setting specific advantage of being able to teleport double that speed seems solid to me. Electrical shielding offers you a scaling ancestry resistance to electricity, as well as a reaction that can potentially make your enemy take electricity damage when you take it instead. It's a little weird because that creature can't have already taken damage from the effect that damaged you. So if you both get caught up in some, electrical explosion or something like that, and they have already been damaged by that effect, you can't use your reaction to then send the damage at them. But I think a lot of times your lightning bolt style things that are going to be aimed intentionally to miss the enemies, you're still going to be able to redirect some of that damage to it. While I might not be excited about this ability within the context of Pathfinder, where electricity damage might not be the most common, I expect to see a lot more of that in Starfinder. So this feels reasonable. Speaking of the drift, there's also a 13th level reaction where you can just kind of become concealed against a triggering strike, which is solid. We've kind of seen that elsewhere already. Huge thumbs up to those sorts of generic reactions. There's a very interesting ability at level 17th called Drift Strike. It's a little narrow and things have to go well, but it's very interesting. So if your last action was a melee strike that critically hit a creature, you're going to attempt to teleport them up to a distance of 20 feet from its starting location. The downside here is they get a will save to negate it. If it's a success, you still get to teleport them, but it's half the distance, and it can't be moved into a location that is hazardous or would result in a fall. On a failure, this is where it gets interesting. You just teleport the creature up to the noted distance. So you can teleport a creature into something like a spell that one of your comrades is sustaining, or you can teleport them off a bridge and they will fall. And in the context of a space campaign where I think there are more likely to be like very scary hazards, volcanoes, giant pits, suns, whatever, I think a clever player can do some crazy things with this, but it's a little narrow. Again, it is going to require a critical strike and then a failure to do the most busted things that you are capable of doing with this. But when it works, boy, it's cool. And the last feat that I'm going to talk about in this video is Spectra Ascendant. It does a lot. You stop aging, you gain dark vision, you gain a fly speed equal to your land speed, the cosmic trait if that matters. If you're in the drift, your fly speed is double your land speed, and you get a cosmic blast 2-action activity, which is a giant laser in a 120-foot line for 7d12 fire damage using your class DC or your spell save DC. Solid all around. So those are the feats that stand out to me the most from Starfinder 2nd Edition. I am sure I have missed some stuff, and I mean this genuinely. This is not engagement bait. Like, get in the comments if you have other cool combinations of things to do with ancestries, or you have like ways they line up with the new class as well. Please let me know. I am going to be eagerly consuming content about Starfinder 2nd Edition as I sort of start learning this system and figure out how to splice it into Pathfinder in very, very cool ways. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and if you made it to this point of the video and you aren't already subscribed, please consider doing so to support my content. Have a great rest of the day. See ya!